Yeah, so today we are starting our second part for this stage with the panel. And the best thing about this panel is that it is moderated by Sven. And Sven promised me that he'll introduce the rest of the guys participating in the panel. So let's give a round of applause to him first.
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not the best thing in this panel. No, actually, I'll invite him to the stage. So, guys, if you'll join me, please. Is there an order we should be following? Are we gonna have pictures on stage that don't match up? I'm gonna start with Luca on my left here and go to the right. Steve had an intense experience with Bangkok traffic, so he's gonna catch his breath while we do the intros for the other two first. So to my left is Luca. He's CTO at Serenita. Serenita is a company based in the Netherlands, which I'm Dutch, so I'm going to try very hard not to be biased here and give him all the love for the quality that the country brings as a whole. It's beautiful. Everyone says it. They say Holland's so beautiful. Serenita offer non-custodial staking services, which is already cool. They offer, I've tried this, a really cool, simple tax tool for those staking, trying to figure out how much they've earned on their taxes, called ethstaker.tax. But they're not here for that today. They're here to discuss Vero, which is even more exciting, which was released publicly last August only, so it's very new. Vero is a multi-node validator client targeting Ethereum as well as Gnosis chain. We've heard that before, so we might get to that in the end. So that's going to be interesting, which is why they're here today. Next to that is Oisín Kyne, co-founder at Obol. You may have heard of it. Judging by the crowd, I pre-wrote this, but actually judging by the crowd, Obol's not going to need an introduction specifically. They've done amazing work. They've been rock stars at every DevConnect that I've been to anyway. But today, Oisín will be representing Kyne, which is actually a middleware client sitting in between the consensus and validator client. So you can allow squad staking, for example. It says pause for cheering. I don't know what that is. Pause for animal noises. So it actually can work in combination with, for example, Vero or Vouch. Vero, I think, can it work with Vero? It can theoretically.
So, yeah.
Discussed it. I don't know if there's actually instances of that. But we're going to try to put them on the spectrum anyway today, regarding fault tolerance. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Steve Berryman, PhD, not the doctor that will help you with the heart attack you are currently recovering from. Chief Business Officer.
Yeah, after that 25-minute walk,
yeah.
I might need a doctor.
So Chief Business Officer at Attestant. Attestant was recently acquired by Bitwise, so congratulations. Yeah. Now, I don't know what they paid, but they got a great package because for those of you who don't know Attestant, which is actually the other half of the crowd, so they're just the most high-density, big-brained experience bunch that I know within the ecosystem. They run high-scale and very performant. Like we know because we check every day, and you're in the top all the time. So that's just amazing. They're not here to discuss that. They're here to discuss Vouch, which is a multi-node validator client target. No, that's the wrong one. It's the same thing, though. Yeah. Did you target Gnosis as well?
No.
There we go. So we got one difference. But it's also a multi-node validator client. So running for the Lido curated set, I know you run around 25% of the node operators running Vouch. So it's very big. It's established. It's been there for a while, like Attestant. And yeah, so that's what we're here for. I want to dive right into it and start with decentralization. I'm just going to, we only have 30 minutes, so I'm just going to pound you with questions right away. So decentralization, you may have heard the term before, is at the heart of Ethereum's ethos. So how does I'm going to start again from this side. How does your tech, your client, contribute to or align with Ethereum's decentralization goals? So in what way does it support or challenge the idea of further decentralizing the network? Luca.
Yep. So Vero is a validator client. On its own, it doesn't play a big part in decentralizing the entire network, but it does make more advanced and more resilient setups more accessible to node operators. And in that way, I think it helps decentralize the network because more people will be able to run a really high quality kind of setup with multiple beacon nodes and also help client diversity, but I'm sure we'll touch on that later.
I'm sure we were. And for those unfamiliar, how does that work, a multi-node beacon setup?
Multi-node beacon setup, it connects to multiple beacon nodes, and it is able to process data from multiple beacon nodes at the same time. So if they happen to disagree on the head of the chain, it can still work out which chain to attest to. If you connect a multi-node validator client to 3 different client implementations, and 2 of them agree on the state of the chain, your validator is still going to attest.
Is the same way for proposals, for example?
With proposals, you don't necessarily need to work out what the head of the chain is, so you don't need consensus among those beacon nodes. But what you can do is you can request all of those beacon nodes to produce a block, and then you can choose the highest value one. So
okay, is that similar for Vouch?
Exactly, very similar. I mean, the important thing is when we were talking about majority, supermajority, especially when Geth was above 66%, it was never a Geth proposing a block. It's always attesting from a consensus client that has got Geth underneath it. So proposals were fine to take from Geth, and of course for most people, if they've got a single setup, that was the only thing they'd had anyway. Sorry, but having a multi-client setup gives you the more resilience, fault tolerance. So, for example, if you've got one client, you've got Lighthouse and you've got Geth, then having the one client basically means that if there's a fault in that one client, it is going to follow the chain, because you're not gonna know, because you've got no other information to go on. So if you're only running one set of clients, and with even if you've got a multi-client system in between, one client on a debug, it would go the wrong direction, or it would just follow that client. So the idea of multi-level, multi-line clients is basically the more clients you have, the more likely you can consensus between them clients. So if you've got you've got Lido, you've got Prism, and Techio, then you've got at least, if you've got 4, you can do a majority strategy where you would only attest if 2 of them are giving the same results or giving you the same part of the chain, the same head of the chain.
Yeah. Yeah, so we heard Luca say for blocks you can choose the biggest or the fastest, and for attesting you can choose a consensus mechanism. So these are different strategies, and I've heard the term strategies used within Vouch setups as well.
True, yeah. I mean, majority is one that we've implemented recently, or certainly made available in open source. But it really solves the supermajority problem, where you're never going to be finalizing on a incorrect chain, because if you've got a chain that's got say I think Lighthouse is currently over 33%. If it's got a bug in it, we're just going to ignore it, because the other 3 are going to just carry on going. So this really, it just solves the problem that you just don't know you're on the wrong chain if you only run one client. And of course, for smaller stakers, it doesn't really matter too much. But for the larger stakers, you really don't want to be attesting on the wrong chain.
Yeah.
So and you don't know that unless you're looking at the other 4 chains at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting. So focusing on clients, back to decentralization, Oisín, how does that work with DVT in general and with OBOL specifically?
I'm glad you asked. So I think one of the things that OBOL and distributed validators do that hasn't been done of proof of stake beforehand is allowed for a group of people or entities to run a validator.
Like a squad?
Sorry?
Like a
squad, yeah, exactly. A squad of people staking. This is something that's been, very important to me, and something that I'm super proud of, as far as our work we've done with Lido and others in terms of not having single entities with the private keys to large amounts of stake. Instead, it's a group. And the reason being is I think it's much harder to collude if you have a group of people than if you're on your own, especially if it's not your own capital, you're doing it on behalf of somebody else. if you have to send a very, suspect-looking email to your other operators, like it's quite hard to try and do something, that's not the default or the norm within Ethereum. So yeah, I think kind of groups of people running nodes makes Ethereum more credibly neutral and more decentralized.
Yeah. Yeah, so continue on to that, talking about these squads, who's the ideal user for your solution? Are there specific types of validators or operations where your product performs best? And also are there limitations where you say that these users or these use cases are not for us?
Yeah, so I would say that distributed validators are applicable for all types of validators. I normally kind of bucket into 3 different user types, you might say. You have the small home operators, so either solo stakers or home stakers, things like it. You have the enterprise node operators, people running big fleets, large amounts. And then you have the protocols and delegators. So these are the liquid staking pools, the custodians, people with ETH. All of them can benefit distributed validators, but all of them have different reasons for it. Like, for example, on the retail home staker side, they use it as a way to get into Lido and become, a member of SDVT or now CSM. For an enterprise node operator, they do it so that they can have rolling restarts, so they can move on to bare metal without the fear of a machine dying and them not being able to take up a secondary. And if you're a protocol, you're trying to hedge your operator risk. You're afraid of maybe picking just one operator in case they get hacked by North Korea. You'd rather, 7 and reducing your risk.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so one of the reasons I'm really glad I'm having a fellow Dutch on, or someone from the Netherlands, I should say, on stage is because I don't have a squad in all that. Everyone's into Bitcoin Cash, according to some theories. So what if you don't have a squad? What if it's just you in your basement with your node, right?
I think you should come to the squad staking speed dating at 4 o'clock later today.
Oh yeah.
Find yourself a squad.
Well, they don't need dates, I think. Well, I think the question is coming back to you guys. So squad staking, what do you offer for that, or what is your ideal audience if squad is not that?
For Vero, Vero basically the way it works is it connects to Web3 Signer, and you have the full private key of the validator and Web3 Signer. So it's not really built for this kind of squad staking, which is amazing, and I support the concept.
And we'll get it running in squads, don't worry.
Vero on its own, the use case is different than for squad staking, and I think the same would apply to Vouch.
Is that correct, Steve? Does the answer apply to you guys as well? So,
Sorry, say that again.
Squads, send the squads to Oisín, and you're targeting more the people in control of the private keys themselves.
I don't know much about squads, so unfortunately, but
I can say that Attestant are running. They're in cohort 3 of the Lido Simple DVT testnet, so at least Vouch will be running in squads imminently.
Yeah.
Spotting Will here in the front row.
Yeah, all the combinations are possible, which makes this discussions a bit more difficult. Let's talk about what we've talked about, client diversity a lot, actually. I want to talk about fault tolerance. So, do we have time for an anecdote? We have 15 minutes. I started out in LTO network, and I remember the very first moment I learned about the issues of why it's so hard to run validators, because I was getting these weird errors on my LTO network stake. It's a Waves fork. And it turned out to be, it's because I was running 2 validators, two staking clients with the same key. And that was giving errors every now and then. So I was digging into this with the devs, and they said, yeah, you're not supposed to run them. I said, well, if one goes down, I got the other one. I got leasers depending on me. They need this stuff. And he's like, yeah, it's not a problem, but it gives these errors, right? Because I said, why is that? He said, yeah, I don't know, but the guys at Ethereum seem to be pretty serious about running these double setups. So I remember diving into that. And we're here today with still one of these issues, trying to get a fault-tolerant setup. So to me, that means set up a redundant system, which is not punishable always, but it is always detrimental to the network, because you can double sign different forms of attestations or blocks or whatever. So this trouble of setting up a fault-tolerant but uptime heavy system is still a very big issue. So can we start with you, Oisín, again? So what is that? How does that help? How does DVT or Karen help with these fault tolerance issues?
Yeah, so as you alluded to, running the same private key in two places at the same time that say conflicting things is what Ethereum considers an attack in proof of stake, because it kind of is. That would interfere with the security of the chain.
I was just trying to help, actually, but...
Fair. So this is, and yeah, a lot of people try and do it to be people want their machines online. That's how you get paid rewards. You're like, oh, how do I deal with it like a machine dying? So if you don't have access to the machine, let's say it's like a bare metal machine in some data center, and I've had a situation previously where a data center had a fire and the whole thing went down. All of a sudden you're kind of offline indefinitely, and maybe you're like, okay, I'll bring up a new computer in the cloud for a few weeks, wait till it's back. What happened in this instance actually is they turned back on the power. It actually was maybe in the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. It was an OVH fire, but 4 months later they turned back on the power, and a lot of the machines did not get burned down. They were perfectly fine. They came online, and there was a lot of Tendermint nodes that were jailed. But in Ethereum, that would have kind of caused a slashing. So what's helpful about a distributed validator is all of the pieces don't have the real key. They have like a fraction of it, you might say. So you can run these in different places, and first of all, if 1 out of 4 dies, no big deal. You can stay online. But you can even also accidentally or intentionally run 2 copies of it. And again, you'll get errors, but it'll be generally fine. The distributed validators, they use Byzantine consensus protocol, which basically means they can tolerate less than a third of the nodes saying kind of duplicate messages or saying weird things. So long story short, what it means is that you can run your validators on machines that may go down, maybe go down indefinitely. You can run secondary copies without much risk, so long as you don't run 2 copies of everything. And generally it just lowers the risk of slashing if you don't have the full private key in one place. But both of these gentlemen do it a slightly different way with signers, so maybe they should talk about how they achieve fault tolerance.
Yeah, I want to go just a bit deeper on that before that, because in a typical voucher or Vero setup, I'm guessing you would have, I think you guys set up each client, you could typically set up 5 different clients in some setup, one of each.
Yeah.
I know with Lido, the simple DVT, we have clusters of 7.
Yeah.
So what would a client bug in one of those setups mean? How would that work?
So there's not 7 consensus clients, but if it was a client bug that only 1 or 2 of the nodes were running, they might fail, they might go offline, they might have a catastrophe, but the other 5 would be enough to keep it online.
If they're not one of these...
If they're not in the affected ones. If more than a third of the nodes were affected, you would go offline. And if more than 2/3 of the node were running this dodgy client, let's say the client that decided on a different hash, then you would be exposed all of the other validators would be for picking the wrong chain, as they might say. But if you have a bit of diversity, a mixture of nodes, you should be at least safe, if not also live, to use the more technical terms.
So a third, if there's 2 of 7, that's...
2 of 7, no problem. You're still up. 5 need to be healthy for you to keep going.
So if you're a squad of 7, you try to limit your usage to 2 out of
Yes.
2 clients max.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Cool. So can I ask Steve, how does that work with Vouch? You've touched on it a bit with the strategy, of course, but...
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 parts to it. There's Dirk and Vouch. Dirk is the key signer. So the key signer, like Web Signer, it is independent from the beacon chain or the validator client. So it's got its own protections to stop things being double signed. And Dirk also is threshold signing. The only difference is, for the way Attestant run it, is that we own all the signers. So if we've got 3 of 5, we need only 3 of them machines to be up and running to still continue. Why do we do that? For us, it's resilience. Them 5 machines will be spread across the EU. They'll be using different data providers and on different networks, different machines, different countries. So that gives us protection on the signers. Now, obviously you've got Vouch, which connects to multiple beacon chains, so that protects you against the supermajority. But also, Vouch is a centralized component. So if Vouch fouls, then we stop signing. But because Dirk in the background will stop you double signing for anything, you can actually run an active setting where you run 2 vouchers. Anywhere they can be run on different machines, different countries, and both will attempt to sign. But Dirk will foul one of them and succeed on the other. So that way it's very, very resilient, because a lot of machines have got to foul before we stop signing. Now, clearly this is a very costly operation for home stakers to do, but if you're running, tens of thousands of validators, then even being down, as you guys would know, even being down a few minutes, clients will know, Lido will know, and we would get alert at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's always 3 in the morning if it goes off, wherever I am. So, so that we're protected. That Dirk is our ultimate protection, so that if any double signing comes in, Dirk will just stop it. And the way it works is very simple in the way it keeps the key management. In other words, when it knows it signed something, it writes it to the disk. It doesn't put it into cache, it writes it straight through to the disk and doesn't publish it until it's completely we know it's on the disk, and it goes back out to publish it. So there's no chance, even if a machine fouls, comes back up again, that anything would ever be double signed.
I know, Dirk. I've set it up. I think we talked about it before. I set it up in my my same basenet. It's not easy, but it's not that hard actually. I mean, if you want to set it up across the world, there's going to be some logistics involved. I just set it up on a local machine. All my 2 of 3 Dirks. Can you use Vouch with another signer?
Currently, you can't. Well, we don't allow it because we don't put it in our code. Anybody can fork and connect to the web signer. We like the security setup we have with Dirk, and we're not going to add another thing and risk clients using that. But obviously, it's all open source, and anybody can just fork our repo and add any other signers to it.
Yeah.
But we built it to work with Dirk.
Yeah. Like I said, it's not. For example, you can't Docker config this thing to set up. So it is more advanced. But we get how larger node operators. And sorry, can I take this bridge, because I want to ask Luca how they do, because they have a different approach. Dirk being I don't know, a reason to do it differently, or how did that start?
Yeah, when you use Vouch, you're currently basically forced to use Dirk, right? Because our fork can't implement a cloud to support Web Designer. The risk we see with that is basically any. We've talked about CL client bugs, EL client bugs, but any bug inside of Vouch would mean your validators go down. And if that were to happen, I mean, it's a very solid piece of software and everything. It hasn't happened yet, but it might, right? If that were to happen, your validators go offline, and since so many big operators are using Vouch, a lot of the network goes down with it, and you're going to suffer through some massive inactivity leak penalties. You're not going to get slashed, but that's something to consider, right? With Vero, we have a different approach where we use Web Designer, and if something were to happen inside of Vero, like a bug inside of Vero, you can just switch to a different validator client that uses Web Designer. So in that way, it's kind of more compatible, and that risk has been reduced.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting. I noticed the time, so we actually have to start wrapping up. I do have a final question. See, this is where the prep work fails me, because it says if there are node operators in the crowd, statistically, it's likely they're running a validator with a single beacon node only. Now, I don't think that's the case with this crowd, but I got 2 of them over there. They're running a single beacon node. I'm going to target you 2 guys. What would you advise? Actually, Will as well. The whole front row is running a single beacon node instance. What would you, because these single node setups were not involving them in the discussion, almost forgetting that you 2 guys of your 3 guys are targeting the the fault tolerant option and not the single client go down, everything is fucked option. So what would you advise these guys going forward if they would be interested in increasing the fault tolerance of their setup?
I can answer one thing here. It's that for home stakers, it's an expensive option. But one reason to use certainly a multi-client system is more. It just makes it easy for you to maintain. So even if you're not worried, you're not worried about the supermajority problem. If you've got two, I tend to do this at home, for example, just because then I can take one down and upgrade it without worrying about it. So it means you've got to run two chains. It's not enough to run majority strategy, obviously, because you don't know what the majority is, but it's a cheap way of just making it easier to maintain. Because if you're used to upgrading your machines, you know what I mean. You've got to bring it down, upgrade the software. Will it work? Not sure. But if you run two, you can just and connect it to something like Vouch or another multi-client validator. Then it makes maintenance a bit easier at an extra cost of running an extra beacon chain.
Yeah, so it's for larger scale node operators, would be easier to maintain, faults more stable for faults, and safer as well. So that's your step. Luca, for you?
For us, what you can do with Vero, which is relatively easy for the home staker, is many home stakers do have a fallback node, so they have a primary and then a fallback node. So you can point Vero at both of them, and if you have different client combinations running on both of those machines, Vero will only attest as soon as both of them agree on the head of the chain. So that's a nice way to make sure you're following the correct chain with only two nodes. That's what you can do with Vero.
I have two nodes at home. One has a 1.5 terabyte hard drive. I have to upgrade it. Can I use Vero? Well, I can't rotate it in, but can I use Vero to just take the one down, upgrade it, resync it, and then flawlessly keep on going?
Well, Vero does majority by default. So if you take one of them online, it's not going to be able to reach majority between those two.
Yeah,
you're only going to have 50%. So, but yeah, if you want to be able to take one node down, you have to run at least three. That way you can reach majority using the two.
Okay. And what would you recommend people?
Yeah, so similarly to Steve, if you're a solo staker and you're running away and you're willing to handle a bit of the downtime, that's totally fine. It is, often a bit of extra work to run an extra node, but certainly nobody loves to have downtime when they're fixing the node, doing upgrades. So maybe you can, run two in your house and fix one at a time. What I've done, I'm a solo staker, is I split my keys into 4. I kept a piece, and then I gave 3 other pieces to my friends that are also solo stakers. So now I can just, when I always forget to prune my node, I just delete and resync my Nethermind, and it's fine after a couple hours. It really takes down the uptime requirements, because if you have 4 of us and we're all online even 90% of the time, that still does, very good for uptime. So I just enjoy seeing a load of emails come in saying my node is down. I don't really have that much anymore because I'm running on other people's machines as well and piggybacking. And if they split their keys, I will happily run a piece for them too. So yeah, you can end up with more decentralization, higher uptime, better performance by sticking with your friends.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. We're actually out of time already, but we could go on for another hour at least. For now, I want to thank you all for sharing your insights. It's clear that each approach is different. So you got friends, you got it's low entry. You got a squad. I definitely recommend. I'm really happy. I'm really happy with Vouch, but I'm honestly really happy. There's another player in the field that we've focusing on the differences. But to be honest, I think a multi-node beacon setup really makes sense for a lot of people. It's a bit high entry for the solo staker. But to be honest, if you're a solo staker running 100,000 euros or dollars worth of ETH, come on, let's get a second NUC or maybe a third one in there. What are we talking about, man? We're not running Raspberry Pi, so it's. I think if you run like a pro, you should be running a multi-node beacon.
And we always have to help, so we're always available on Discord and help anybody that needs help setting it up.
Yeah. General, all these Discords, communities are great. So again, I want to thank you guys, Luca, Steve, and Oisín, for your awesome insights. I want to thank the audience for joining today. Oh, do we have time for questions, actually? Do we? We don't. I'm sorry about that. So I hope I asked all your questions. That was the last question. Do you have any questions? And yeah, look these guys up. They're going to be walking around in the crowd, so they're not gone yet. They're just here. And enjoy the rest of the event, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.